y'all, this is Missy Mathis, and this is my presentation for video number 2 for the discussion board module 6B. The first issue that Dr. McClure asked us to talk about today was the issue of what's still unclear to us in the course. And I have to say that my area of uncertainty goes back to the very beginning, where we talked about and learned about the difference between the public good and public goods. And we discussed it in class, and that day in class I felt like I had a pretty decent grasp of it, and certainly I know more about it today than I did before we took this class together, but still a little fuzzy. In addition to that, I think the rest of the modules I've done pretty well, although I will say that there's a lot of terminology in some of these readings that we've done that are just obtuse and unclear. And I'll look them up and I put them in context and it makes sense at the time, but they're certainly not vocabulary words that I think I have added to my particular repertoire. So I think that a lot of these budget finance type of articles use a lot of really big words that aren't necessarily needed to explain the concepts that they're explaining, and I think that makes things sometimes harder than it has to be. So those are my areas of concern or fuzziness at this point. Question number 2 asks us to address the readings, and there's a couple of points that I wanted to talk about as it relates to the reading. And the first is my appreciation for the conversation about management fads. I think that both in higher education and even in the K-12 system, there's a reliance on some educational fads that seem to be working, seem to have some face validity, but there really is no data, no empiricism to support the use of those types of fads. I think that in many cases we need to wait until some data has been collected before we see a widespread adoption of some of these management fads, just so that we can see how well they work or how well they don't work before we spend a lot of money to adopt and put into play these different management ideas. It certainly costs, at least for many of them, a lot of money to institute some of these things. And once we've, put a sort of investment into these management fads, just to turn around and switch them again because we decide that they're not working, I think that's increasing the costs of college rather than reducing the cost at all. I also really appreciated the article about consulting firms and the cost associated with those things. I think that in most cases the fees that we pay consulting firms are outrageous, and the fact that at the end of the day we don't get anything except a pretty predetermined canned response just makes the outlay of cash even more ridiculous. As I was reading the article, it sort of reminded me of the LifeLock TV commercials where you see the dental monitor and the security monitor. They're monitoring things but not fixing anything. Kind of reminds me of consulting firms. They do a lot of monitoring, a lot of advising, but it all seems very vague and very general in most cases, without really giving us any solutions to any problems or any data to support their solutions. So I'm not a fan of consulting firms. My college, the community college that I work at, spent tens of thousands of dollars for a consulting firm to study our parking situation and give us a set of recommendations that I feel like our staff could have come up with similar or better recommendations for the price of what we pay them to be on staff at the college. So I just feel like that tremendous outlay of cash for a parking consultation was a big waste of money in a budget when we don't have money to waste. So I appreciated that conversation about the problems with managing firms. Lastly, Dr. McClure asked us to submit any ideas we have for cutting down college costs. And my first one is my pet peeve, quite frankly. At my institution, we have a paper trail for everything, and many times it's documented in triplicate, and that just drives me insane. I also think that we could cut costs that we spend on athletics. It would probably be a good idea to reduce administrative staff where there is redundancy. And one slightly more creative idea would be to use our space better in a way that we could maybe rent out our facilities, rent out our classrooms more effectively. So promote that, advertise that we rent out space and use our facilities more efficiently in that regard. Okay, those are my thoughts. I appreciate you listening.